All right. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Connect Secure partner call. Really appreciate all of you taking the time. I think there was a few people saying that they couldn't hear, but we're just starting. So Shiva, we have a whole bunch of, as usual, exciting updates, upgrades to announce. So yeah, please take it away.
Thanks, Srikanth. Very good morning to everyone. So anybody who's in Europe, good afternoon, because I see Chris Blunt over there. So the first thing that I want to start off is essentially we've been talking about the new platform and when it's going to come, etc. I'm so sure I'm basically going to kind of walk through what are we going to do as a release plan. So 7th of August, basically there is a new whitelist notification that will be sent to all the customers so that they'll be used to you'll be able to use the system seamlessly. Now, what I call as a whitelist notification is there are fundamentally like 4 or 5 changes that are occurring. One is essentially, since you know that now we are rebranded as Connect Secure and we continue to keep doing everything under the Cyber CNS umbrella, we are essentially migrating everything over to the Connect Secure domain, while basically also retaining whatever you have in your Cyber CNS domain and basically keeping it alive. Second is that we are basically getting a new digital certificate for the Connect Secure, which essentially will be the one with which the new agents will get signed with. So again, that is basically being done so that everything looks, because the point is that when you essentially sign up with Connect Secure and then you essentially see a certificate which says Netalytic Security Inc. and then there are a lot of questions. So essentially we remove all of that stuff with this new certificate that we're deploying the agents with. And third is basically in terms of the location from where agents are downloading the updates, etc. That is essentially changing. It's going to be a new domain called agentupdates.myconnectsecure.com. So essentially, those are basically going to be the whitelisting instructions that we are essentially going to provide everyone and give you adequate time so that you can essentially get ready for the transition. And once this whitelisting is done, then essentially your the migration will be seamless, and so you will essentially kind of not notice much. And as we committed earlier, what we will be doing is that we will be giving you the option to essentially use the old portal and the new portal for at least a period of essentially 2 months. And then we are going to basically, so that you can essentially train and basically move forward with all of the other pieces that you need before you essentially kind of fully commit to the new platform. And we'll take your feedback in terms of when that whole process needs to be done. So on 16th August, we'll be doing an instance demo in this particular call, but we will be extending this call to become a 2-hour call because we'll be walking through all the use cases and basically questions that you may have. And we are hoping that there will be a lot of questions at that point of time. So we essentially want everyone to be there. So we're going to basically convert that instance to a webinar mode where we will essentially be able to handle more participants. So we will be sending out a communication on that. The same, after we basically finish that initial demo, I'm sure that there are going to be a whole bunch of suggestions that why don't you do this, why don't you do that, etc. So we're going to take a week to essentially review all those changes, and whatever changes can be done, we will review that changes on the 23rd. Now, on the 28th August, all our customers who basically are in US East domain, so US East will essentially get migrated. Now, you may ask me, why is it that we're doing US East first? Because the maximum number of customers basically are there in US East. Now, my team basically invariably tells me that, okay, let's release it in APAC because we have the smallest distribution of customers over there. However, the way that we are going to release this is basically release this in US East too, because that is where we will essentially know when the issues are occurring or if there are any issues occurring with the system. And we can basically fix them very quickly. So that's the reason for basically putting it in US East too. And then post that on 1st September, we will essentially be releasing everything for the US West 2 customers. So you will essentially see the new portal basically released for the US West 2. 3rd September is when basically it will be released for EU and UK. And finally on 7th September for APAC. So this essentially is going to be the release cycle and with all of the new updates, etc. Now, the question that must be on top of your mind is, why is this taking so much of time? And you guys basically have been saying that you'll be doing this. So we went through writes and rewrites, but we're redoing the entire product structure. And we are essentially kind of removing technical debt for the next 5 years, which is saying that for the next 5 years, we won't run into any technical debt. So one of the key things and changes that we've taken is we are migrating all our code to a new language, which is Rust. So earlier, a lot of people who have come to our architecture have essentially seen we used a combination of Python, Go, and all of these languages. But now we are essentially migrating all of the code to Rust. And Rust is not an easy language to master, but if it's done correctly, it makes the entire process secure. The second thing that we are also doing is we're kind of reimagining the whole UI and basically getting out of this whole thing of the whole asset-centric views, where you basically have to click on each asset to find out what's going on, etc. And we are basically moving towards what is called a problem-centric view and a risk-centric view, which basically we're going to be showing all of you this whole thing. And we are taking in suggestions from a whole bunch of people, right? In terms of like Chris is helping us basically kind of model the product. And there is Tim, who's basically trying to help us with this product. And then there is Dennis and others. So we're kind of taking all the things that you've said over the past 2 years in terms of what should be there and how we are doing with respect to others, what are the problems with the other products, and then putting this together. And last but not the least, what we are doing is that when we are doing this whole problems to be fixed, right? You've seen some of this basically actually come out in previews, because what we didn't want to do is to say that, yeah, we're doing this big bang approach. So for example, we basically created the entire set of GPOs, which basically would essentially get your compliance in place, right? Similarly, we created local policies, which basically will get your compliance in place. Similarly, we are essentially now taking every single network vulnerability. So say, for example, if you say that my certificate, my basically end system basically is having insecure ciphers. Now, today, the way that it works is you have to essentially go in and you have to fix this whole problem yourself, right? Now, or your technician has to figure out how is he going to fix this ciphers issue. Now, with this new thing, what we are doing is that we're going to give you a script. So it's basically evolving in the same model that we are doing with compliance, right? With compliance, I gave you a GPU. I said, deploy it yourself. Now, when you folks basically come back and tell me I'm confident of this, now you do this automatically. When I click on an asset, you can click on the asset on that particular deployment, and you can say, I want to deploy it, and it will deploy it itself. The same thing with the fixes for network vulnerabilities, because network vulnerabilities are nothing but misconfigurations. It could be your IIS, which is misconfigured. It could be your Nginx, which is misconfigured. It could be your WordPress that's misconfigured. Now, the biggest problem is trying to find the solution, then going and fixing it. So we are essentially today moving into a direction where we are basically creating this database where for each of these problems, how will you fix it, and a script that can fix it so that you can essentially deploy it in your end system and basically make that vulnerability go away, right? So this is basically being taken very seriously across the entire gamut, which includes all of your on-prem assets, Windows, Linux, Mac. It takes care of all of your like Active Directory, and it's basically whatever is required for Active Directory. Plus, the third one is all of your cloud assets. So across all the three, we are essentially going to be taking care of this, which means that if you have assets in Azure, we basically are discovering those assets in Azure. And if it is not basically configured correctly, we will essentially give you what you need to do to fix those configurations. So this is essentially the entire gamut of what we are working on. And that is why we are essentially seeing that this effort is taking a lot of time, because we have to test each of the fixes that we're giving you. So for example, when we gave you GPOs, the reason we gave you the GPOs was because you could deploy it and then you're compliant, right? So it was instant. Now, while you can get instant gratification on our side, we have to make sure that it works 100% of the time. And if we give you something that does not work or causes a problem, it's a liability for us, right? Because we basically made you run a script and the script didn't do it. That is basically wrong. So essentially, that is where we are essentially focusing on, to make sure that these things are basically A, you can apply the script, B, you can revert the script, C, you will have no problems with the script. And that is what we have to test continually on. So when I basically create a script, I have to test it on everything starting from Windows 7 all the way down to Windows 2022, which has been released, all the Windows 11, that 23H2, which is basically just getting released, because we cannot have a situation where it works for something and does not work for the other thing. So that's essentially what we are working on right now. Now, why Rust? So the thing which will be say, what's the cool thing about Rust, what it is. So if folks, just to give you an understanding, Rust is basically a language which essentially is what they call as security centric, right? So the beauty of this language is it does not allow, like you cannot essentially assign a variable to something random and basically, or you cannot have unprotected memory basically lying around in any place. And Rust has been built so to essentially take care of this particular scenario. And Microsoft is essentially moving the entire kernel into Rust. Okay, so the good part about this moving into Rust, the kernel moving into Rust is that the number of vulnerabilities you will see from the Microsoft kernel itself will start reducing over the period of the next 1 or 2 years. So today, whenever you see a security update and it says basically I have 1,000 vulnerabilities, 2,000 vulnerabilities, a lot of these essentially are stemming from the backlog which is there in the languages which are older. So Mark Rusnovich, who's basically also a good friend of mine, basically has repeatedly said that we need to move into Rust, and those are the languages that are there for the future. So we are basically kind of taking the same approach where we are basically migrating our entire code base, whether it is be the agent or the server side, everywhere essentially we are now putting Rust. The only places where we are not having Rust is basically wherever we need some quick tools, like for example, wherever we're doing some automation in terms of integrating with other third-party systems, where we need some flexibility in terms of what kind of data needs to be sent and received, etc. Those will essentially, which are not performance sensitive, only those will continue to kind of remain in Python, but we will evolve a way to see if we can migrate those two. But this is essentially what we are doing, so that we don't have a problem tomorrow saying that, oh, there was some problem here and basically we had a compromise or etc. At least we've done our bit to essentially make sure that none of this will ever occur. Okay. So what from as a partner, like since I moved to Rust, what is it that I gain? The first is that you can essentially sleep well at night knowing that there can be no memory corruption, there are no memory errors, etc. So no takeover from a memory perspective is possible using the executables that we provide. Second is that from a size perspective, the entire agent footprint will essentially reduce by almost 75%. So today, for example, your agent is approximately around 100 MB, right? So we basically getting the agent size down to around 12 to 18 MB. That's where we essentially kind of will land up at the end of this. Third, your resource utilization on basically your 2-core machine will reduce by almost 25% compared to what it is right now. One of the constant things that we keep seeing is that, oh, the server response is slow. And one of the reasons for that is essentially because some of these virtual machine based languages, what happens is that they essentially keep a lot of things in memory in the heap. They don't garbage collect quickly enough. And then your machine goes into like a stuck state. So these are essentially problems. The moment we essentially move to Rust, what will essentially happen is that you don't have any garbage collection because it does not keep any garbage along with it. And with this, we'll essentially see an improvement of at least 300x in terms of speed, in terms of with the APIs in Rust. And since it's a system level language, you basically have direct access to the system. So what we will be able to provide is going to be far better. And we will be able to expand also much faster going forward. So with that said, we added a bunch of features in the existing tool because we have to keep evolving this while the new platform is coming in, and keep parity with that too. So one of the things that we talked about is basically people wanted to essentially know, like, if I have a role, who are the people who are assigned to that particular role? So now you can essentially see that in the roles page, you have who are the assigned users. And from the assigned users, essentially you can see the, like you can click on that number and essentially see who are the users who are assigned to that particular role. Now, one of the things that we constantly saw was, and this also became a problem with a lot of the billing that we were doing, etc., where people said, oh, these are not assets which are basically this thing. So you get these kinds of assets, right, which basically is because of either the firewall responding, and then there is a new issue that we basically discovered, which is if your subnet on the machine that you're running a probe from, if that subnet mask is not the same as the subnet mask that you've configured on the router for that particular VLAN or for that particular network. So for example, people configure a /8 subnet on the router as the interface, right? And then basically give it to, they do not further divide the subnet. But however, while entering the subnet on the machines, they essentially enter it as a /24 subnet. Now, in this particular case, what happens is when you kind of walk through the entire set of IPs, you essentially find that you see a problem and you basically get all the IPs responding to you. And in this particular case, what we essentially are doing is that we are basically doing, we basically introduce 3 rules. If I'm able to detect any one of MAC, hostname, or OS types, and basically I detect no ports, then I will basically add it to active assets. However, if you look at this over here, I've detected nothing. I cannot see any data. I can't see the OS. I can't see the MAC. I can't see the host name. But basically, I see some couple of ports which are detected. Then I basically move it into another category, which is called other assets. Now, other assets basically allows you to, what this other assets does is, it's just keeping it there for information, but it does not get counted against your billing. It is basically purely for information sake, and it basically is not an active asset. And if the MAC, host name, and OS type, none of them are detected, and there are no ports, we don't even create that asset. So we won't even bring it into other assets, and we basically are removing this. This way, we basically are removing all the clutter that we have because of basically devices that are not behaving properly. So this will remove that whole thing. And second, basically, I know that a lot of you had some problems with billing. All of those billing issues will go away. And basically, if you've been wrongly moved to the other tier, we'll basically be moving you back to the old tier. Okay. The next one is that one of the partners basically kind of was telling us that I really want to see basically when you're talking about compliance, I want to essentially you to map my the 853 controls to basically the STIG that corresponds to it. So we've been able to kind of do that mapping and provide this particular mapping. So you can essentially see which STIG is basically kind of required for this particular compliance. Now, the ability to delete external scan results along with external scan configurations is something that people ask for, so that has been provided. So if you can basically delete all these external endpoints, and basically once it's deleted, you can essentially see that if the configuration is deleted in the results, you can essentially see that the configuration has been deleted. Now, the next one was that basically we earlier were listing all these vulnerabilities, but then you had to click on each one of them to go and look at the description that it linked to. Right now, we can essentially see all the description right over here. So that is the next thing. You can filter between assets which essentially have been scanned, or basically anything that has not been scanned, with basically for which credential scan has not been performed. So you can essentially kind of filter the assets based on that. And then basically you can, we have a backup required tag that can be added to for assets. So then what happens is that if the backup is required, then it will essentially kind of annotate it and basically kind of create a remediation saying that a backup has to be added for this. We added a new internal network vulnerability summary report. We had basically the detailed report earlier, but basically we didn't have a summary report, and this was something that was requested. We've added this. And so you can see that this is basically kind of the summary report. And then the ability to copy settings between, like, so for example, what was happening is that people were basically, you had created a company mapping, you created what kind of event sets you wanted for that particular company, and then you want to copy it over to the new company, other companies that you're creating, then no problem, you can essentially kind of copy those settings over. And it's a very simple workflow. You choose the source company, the target company, and then you're done. So you can essentially kind of create a profile. So the next one is that the ability, so one of the things that was constantly being asked is that I want to be able to, and it was there on these calls itself, I want to be able to convert an existing lightweight agent into a probe, or a probe into a lightweight agent. So this facility is now available. So you can essentially kind of choose one or more agents, convert them into migrate them to a probe if they're lightweight agents. And then the only thing that will happen is that it will essentially tell you that all the assets that were essentially discovered by that probe will be kind of removed, and the so because it's a lightweight agent, it's not supposed to basically cross the boundary of the machine, right? So then that's one part. And the second one is basically if you move from a probe to a lightweight agent, this is basically you can just say migrate to lightweight agent and it will migrate from a lightweight agent. And then it will basically provide you with this message so that you can essentially do the migration. The next one is that there were a lot of people who are basically using the PIA scan, and thankfully, basically thanks to a lot of you who basically ran the test with the new PIA scan code that we basically released. Again, that was essentially an extension that we released to essentially kind of speed up the PIA scans. And we basically received good feedback on that. And one of the things which was asked is that I want basically to choose which extension types I want to essentially scan. I don't want the extension types that I don't want to basically. Now the point is that now we basically have the ability for you to choose whatever extensions you want and basically remove all the extensions that you don't want. So you can essentially add your own custom extensions over here. The only other thing which basically a few like I know that Henry Overton had basically commented on the whole thing, saying that he's not finding the results useful because he's not able to exclude some folders where he knows that PIA data is there. Now, the concept is that we will be providing you with like default exclude folders, etc., to go forward. But from a compliance perspective, now, even if you have a QuickBooks file and I'm able to see a certain credit card number or something in the QuickBooks file, it still basically from a standards perspective is not PIA compliant. So we will have to deal with that, and basically maybe we'll have to give mechanisms for people to have exceptions in this, and that is something that we are putting into the workflow of the new version that we are coming up with. So these are essentially the PIA scan results, and it can basically show this. So with that said, I also want to basically kind of call out that next week the entire team is basically going to be on an offsite, including basically Peter, our CEO, and everybody is basically joining for this particular offsite. So during the course of next week, we will be handling all P1 and P2 tickets, and P3 tickets will be handled the following week. But if you ever are facing a problem that you need immediate attention to, please send a mail to me, shiva@connectsecure.com, and I will make sure that that problem is taken care of. So please, it is not that we're not going to be doing this, but I'm just being transparent in terms of saying that people are out. So I do not know whether they're going to look at their tickets, etc. But if you basically need immediate attention, please send me a mail and I will make sure that the entire team is on top of it. So that essentially is the wrap up of the events this week. So I can take any questions that basically come up. Okay, so let me just
Shiva, there are a couple of questions. One is Dennis has one question. You want to quickly take that? About the lightweight agent?
Okay, so lightweight agents, are they still running scans on a schedule or they report changes autonomously? So lightweight agents, basically the new ones are autonomous. That is, they will continuously watch for changes on the system and they will keep sending data across. There is no schedules. There is no concept of schedules at all in the new lightweight agent, and only for probes they will essentially have schedules. The updates that you're showing live, or when will they be live? They're already live, Dennis. All of these are basically live as of today. There is nothing that is essentially pending to be basically pushed. All of these are live today. Okay. So perfect. So is there, when would be the plan changes appear for on-premises customers? Okay, Simon, one of the beautiful things that you've done with this whole Rust-based thing is it's the same thing. So earlier, this was one of the things that we basically took back from the whole thing, right? When we basically did V2, we made a big mistake, which is basically our on-prem architecture and our cloud architecture were basically different. And one of the reasons for that was because we were using some of the services, and basically the equivalent services to run it on a single machine was basically become a problem, etc. Now with Rust and the whole change that we made, it is exactly replica to replica on this. And so for all the on-prem users, basically post September 8th, I will basically will be sending out emails to each one of you, and you will have to just give me a window of 2 hours when I can take control of your machine, and we will essentially install the new updates. Nothing will change. You will also get both the user interfaces. You will get the old and the new one. And basically, you will be able to see all the data on the same machine. It's not 2.14. It will essentially be version 3.0 that is basically getting rolled out on the August 17th. You will see a 3.0 getting rolled out. That will essentially start reporting autonomously. That's the Rust waste agent. Joe, patching will be improved, but basically, as I told you, the patching, the reason it will be improved is not because we are basically building a database of what basically should be used as a patch for every single application, and we are going to basically be patching every single application. And the only thing which we will basically not release at the time of in the first week of September is basically the OS patching piece, but come October, you will essentially be able to do OS patching too. That said, if you have an RMM, we also are basically building hooks into all the RMMs so that you can essentially deploy the patches through them. So that is essentially what we're doing. And more reliable, better reporting. So that is basically something that I want to show as a surprise on the 15th, on the 16th call. Please come to that call, because you will essentially see what a drastic change has happened in reporting, because that is what we have to do. So John, on updating documentation, yes, we have a new VP of documentation who basically has joined us with the single focus on documentation. And if you look at it, one of the reasons for why basically the whole release is going to be taking so long is because the new documentation is being written, and on day one, essentially the documentation will be ready. More than documentation, what we are focusing on is that you basically have everything in the tool, so that you don't need to essentially go and refer any documentation. So we are bringing the maximum amount of documentation into the tool itself, and that is one of the changes in the UI completely. That is, you should go to the documentation 10% of the time, 90% you know everything in the tool itself, and the tool will guide you into getting what needs to be done. So that's what we are focusing on in the new UI, not basically saying that, okay, for everything you have to go and refer to some documentation. But yes, documentation, Ryan on this call will essentially be taking care of it and making sure that you get top-notch documentation this time, and we do not do a bad job that we've done like previously. Joe, you have access to all of the metrics. So anything that we develop, anything that we develop is basically API based. There is nothing which you see on the UI which is not API based. There are people who basically have used the entire API to develop new products on top of it. So anything that you want will be there in an API. If you basically needs, if you need anything, which basically you are not seeing in the API, please let us know. We are going to be happy to basically get you an API to do it if it is not published already. So that's how it works. It does not, there is nothing hidden. Everything is API-able. And again, your API key again is tied to your role. So it is a role-based, access-based API key. Then is embedded links. Yes, that is part of the new UI, not embedded links. And basically, even that embedded links not taking you through a separate page, but basically opening up in context in that same page, so that you are not basically, so that you're not distracted. Perfect. So if there are no more questions, then we're going to basically kind of any type of mobile access for admins planned. Joe, you have to wait for the 16th meeting for that, because the answer is yes. We basically, since we're using a new framework, it basically has, you have the ability for, it has basically a built-in mobile app. It basically also has, so it basically works across all devices. You can have it as a thick client, you can have it as a web client, plus you can essentially run it on your mobile device. So it basically is cross-device and cross-platform. Perfect. So folks, we'll reconnect after we basically come back from the event. So on 6th, and basically we'll take it up from there. I want to thank you all for your time and basically all your support during this period. Please feel free to basically, as I said, next week, in case anything you're seeing that you need help on, please send me a mail and I am basically there to take care of things. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.